Criminal justice and crime have emerged as key issues in this year's presidential election. It is clear that the Democrats have moved away from some of the language they have used in 2020, when the Black Lives Movement was at its apex. The 2024 party platform, on the other hand, says we need to fund the police, not defund the police. Stark shift from the activist messaging of the last election. Also calls for more police on the streets, nor does it express opposition to the death penalty, the first time since 2012. This is all a marked change.
Today we want to discuss one case. It's the case of Chrystul Kizer, the Black teenager shot and killed a 34-year-old white man named Randall Voller III, who sexually abused and trafficked her when she was just 16 years old. She killed him when she was 17. Last week, a Wisconsin judge sentenced her to 11 years in prison with another 5 under supervision. That's after a petition to drop all charges garnered 1.5 million signatures. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled in 2022 that her lawyers could argue the crime was justified because she was trafficked by him and was the victim of his kidnapping. So, what does this case say about the justice system? It reminds me of one of my favorite movies of all time, Robbie. You usually talk about movies. I have a movie, A Time to Kill. It's with Matthew McConaughey, Sandra Bullock's in it, and a man in the South, a Black man, had his daughter attacked and brutally raped by a group of men, and he, in a rage, killed, allegedly, the man who did it, or one of the men who did it. And the jury found him not guilty. And I think there's some kind of sort of insanity plea that makes a lot of sense when one of your close loved ones is murdered or has something horrible done to them. Something just takes over instinctually to want to, do something about it. And I think this is one of the cases where 17 years old, after going through this, was she in her right mind? But what would the implication of an insanity plea here be? Because many people would say you're in your right mind if you want to do something like that to a person who abused you and who held you hostage, trafficked you. It kind of makes sense. It feels like self-defense to some extent. And so it's a very interesting case where people are grappling with, well, maybe morals and the law are not the same thing.
Yeah, so I read, there was an opinion piece in the New York Times. It was an opinion piece about this woman, Chrystul Kizer, written by an opinion writer named Rachel Louise Snyder. I questioned a lot of the assertions in this piece. There was a lot of claims about racial and gender-based imbalance and how these crimes are prosecuted that I wasn't sure about. The kind of sex trafficking catch-all. I mean, she was basically doing prostitution with this person in a pimp role. I don't think that's a reason to kill someone. You should just get yourself out of it. But the instigating event when she killed him, it wasn't like revenge or some kind of escape, but he was assaulting her. He was on top of her. He was trying to rape her. Again, I don't know if these details are accurate, but that's what is alleged in this article. In which case, then I would say it's not a philosophically self-defense. It's just literal self-defense. He was attacking her, and excuse me, we have some construction starting above me. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, it just sounds like normal self-defense to me.
Yeah, I do think there's a case to be made for self-defense in this case, but also it is common in this kind of, pimp scenario that a lot of the women that work for a man are subjected to give him sex. It's kind of like an exchange for services. And so I really don't understand how 11 years plus 5 years of supervision makes sense as punishment for this crime when you have people like Kyle Rittenhouse getting off scot-free. I just think the application of the law, especially in terms of self-defense, should be more consistent, especially across race.
Well,
and yeah, I think people feel a sense of justice. I saw a sign around if a woman is raped and she can be charged with murder if she gets pregnant and decides to abort the child, what incentive does she have to just not murder her rapist if she's going to jail for murder anyway, if she doesn't want to carry the child? And so there's a lot of interesting questions around justice and what it means to kill someone who abused you in today's day and age. That sign is becoming increasingly popular at a lot of these protect the right to abortion, people being against the anti-choice crowd rallies.
Right. I mean, you can't kill someone just for abusing you. You can you can go to the police and the police can charge them with something. You can't. Don't want some kind of vigilante system. You bring up Kyle Rittenhouse, who was correctly, in my view, I actually did a lot of radars on it on the time, correctly found innocent for shooting people in self-defense who were attacking him, one of the survivors testifying during the trial that he was that person was the initiator and that Kyle Rittenhouse was responding. So again, just as that, I think, ended up being a much clearer cut self-defense case than it was made out to be in the media before the trial got underway. And then we saw a lot of the evidence and testimony that it really was self-defense. Again, I don't know exactly what the details are here. This is a very frankly biased, to my mind, telling of the facts. But if this person was attacking her, again, not just like he had abused her at some point in the past, because if that was the case, then you should go to the police, but was actually in the process of physically assaulting her, so yes, then self-defense is justified. I think it's helpful to avoid overcomplicating issues or bringing in like race and gender in the entire system. It seems in this case it should have been self-defense. Now, she ended up not going to trial and pleading guilty. This is a problem with the criminal justice system because she didn't want to face the risk of, like, this happens all the time because everybody gets overcharged, and then instead of actually going to trial where you would try to plead your case in front of a jury and have to convince them that it's there's a beyond a reasonable doubt that you're guilty. Nobody risks that because the mandatory minimum sentencing is so egregious. You can't do that. So instead they take these plea deals for lesser but significant still amounts of jail time. I think that whole process is very bad and deeply in need of reform. It should be judges and juries determining guilt and the appropriate punishment for people accused of crimes, not legislators who are writing these, who are saying there's a mandatory minimum. You can't consider any exogenous factors. You couldn't say, like, maybe this would be a case where they'd say, well, it was the killing, her actions were too extreme given the situation she was in, where maybe he was threatening or being physical with her some way, but she didn't have the right to kill him. That might be something a jury or a judge would determine, where then they would give you some sentence that was appropriate to that reality, that you were justified in taking some measure to protect yourself, but not going all the way and committing murder, and then they could give some sentence commensurate with that. But instead, what we're having is, well, I'm not even going to trial because the mandatory minimum, because that judgment is being taken away from the judge and the jury. They wouldn't get to do that, so I can't risk it, so I have to plead guilty to however much time she got. That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem in the criminal justice system. You'll have detectives give false information, misleading information, saying the other defendants or co-conspirators already spoke, and if you just confess now and take this plea deal, you're going to get less time, you're going to get a better deal if you tell us everything you know. And then we've had witnesses give false testimony and recant it, and the testimony they've given has kept people in prison. And so it's a system that completely needs to change in that regard. As far as sentencing goes, some of the progressive leaning criminal justice reform experts and research firms, including one that I worked at, you have these funders who come in with an agenda of what they want to research. And the project I was working on was pretty good. It was assessing the effect of cash bail on individuals. But I looked into the funder, the Laura and John Arnold Foundation, and they tend to fund research that has to do with sentencing and doing further research into what that looks like. I found that there's all kinds of people that are assessing the use of artificial intelligence to make decisions for arraignments. Because there's so much leeway a judge has for the same crime, we're seeing very different circumstances that a defendant faces before they've ever been convicted of a crime. They've just been charged, whether or not they're held in jail during that time, what cash bail is set at. And so the mandatory minimums are definitely bad. But then there's other areas of the justice system where the judge has far too much leeway to decide how to handle a case. And for the same exact crime, someone could be kept in jail for months, lose their job, lose their apartment, their life could fall apart, while someone else who's accused of the very same crime is let out on a very small number of dollars paid in cash bail. And so just assessing the different circumstances, there's got to be some consistency, but it can't be the kind of consistency where a situation like this happens and the victim who's 17 years old and has been abused has no leeway.
All right, we'll be back with more Rising right after this.